Hello. Welcome to this quiet lecture, where history drifts into legend, and legends breathe through silence. Tonight, we walk among the shadows and lights of the Vatican, a city of faith and secrets. Some of its doors are open, others stay closed for centuries. If you enjoy calm stories filled with mystery, please subscribe, so you won't miss the next journeys. Now, let us begin, slowly, step by step, into the ancient heart of the Vatican. Long before marble walls and golden halls, there were quiet prayers and hidden rooms. In the vast city of Rome, small groups gathered at night, whispering words of hope. They spoke of one man, Jesus of Nazareth, whose love was stronger than fear. Among them were Peter and Paul, travelers and teachers. Their footsteps echoed through narrow streets, carrying the birth of a new belief. Both would face chains and death, yet their faith would outlive empires. Part 2. The Apostle Peter. Tradition tells us that Peter came to Rome, not as a ruler, but as a shepherd. He walked among the poor, preached beside fountains and markets. They say he performed small miracles, healing, comforting, forgiving. But Rome was a hard place for new faiths. When persecution came, Peter was captured. It is said that he chose to die as his teacher did, but upside down, feeling unworthy to mirror Christ. On that hill of death, a seed of belief was planted. The story says that Peter tried to flee Rome, afraid that his death would silence the believers. But on the road, he saw a vision of Christ walking toward the city. Peter asked, "Lord, where are you going?" And Christ answered, "To be crucified again." Shaken, Peter turned back, knowing his fate. They say he was taken to the ancient circus of Nero, and there, nailed to a cross, upside down. The crowd watched in silence, but the faith he carried did not end with him. Centuries later, on that same hill, the great Basilica of St. Peter would rise, built upon what was believed to be his resting place, a place where stone remembers pain and devotion, and where pilgrims still whisper prayers into the marble, hoping someone, somewhere, listens. Paul came to Rome as a prisoner, yet his words moved more freely than any chain could hold. He spoke before judges, soldiers, and strangers, telling them of love that conquers fear, of light that survives darkness. They say he wrote letters from his cell, letters that would one day shape the world. When his sentence came, he did not cry out. He bowed his head, calm, resolved. By tradition, he was taken to the Ostian Road, and there, beneath the open sky, he was beheaded. 3 fountains are said to have sprung from the ground, where his head touched the earth 3 times. Today, pilgrims walk that same road, carrying candles and silence. For both Peter and Paul, 2 men so different, shared one destiny: to build faith with their lives and seal it with their deaths. After Peter's death, his followers buried him quietly, in a simple grave near Nero's circus. For centuries, no one dared to mark the spot. Only a few signs scratched into stone, words of prayer, a carved fish, a key. As time passed, emperors came and fell. Cities burned and rose again. Yet beneath the soil, the grave remained untouched. In the 4th century, Emperor Constantine ordered a grand basilica to be built, right above that humble tomb. He believed the heart of the church should rest on the heart of its first witness. Beneath the altar of St. Peter's Basilica, archaeologists later found a necropolis, ancient walls and bones wrapped in purple cloth. Some say it is Peter, others remain uncertain. But every year, millions stand above that place, feeling the quiet weight of 2,000 years. From the hidden tomb grew a city unlike any other. What began as whispers in the dark became the voice of an empire, and later, the smallest state in the world. Every stone in the Vatican tells a story, a faith tested, rebuilt, and reborn. Pilgrims still cross oceans to stand beneath the great dome. Some come seeking miracles, others come seeking peace. And though centuries have passed, the air still carries the same hush, the same reverence, as if the spirits of Peter and Paul still walk there, unseen. Their courage shaped the walls, their words filled the halls, and the light of their faith still burns, softly, through the marble glow of St. Peter's Basilica. Now, let us move further, to the time when an emperor's dream turned devotion into stone. Part 3. Constantine's Vision. The empire that once hunted Christians began to change under one man, and Constantine the Great. They say he saw a vision in the sky before battle, a shining cross above the sun, and the words, "In this sign you will conquer." That night, he dreamed again, hearing a voice tell him to fight under the mark of Christ. He won the battle, and soon after, the persecutions ended. The faith that had survived in shadows stepped into the light of the empire. Constantine built churches where martyrs had fallen, and honored the apostles he had never met. But his greatest monument rose on the Vatican Hill, above the quiet grave of Peter. Workers lifted stones, priests prayed, and a new world began to take form, one where faith and power stood side by side, watching each other, sometimes in harmony, sometimes in fear. The first St. Peter's Basilica was vast and solemn, its roof held by ancient Roman columns, its floors glowing with mosaic light. Pilgrims came from far lands, walking for weeks, to kneel before the tomb beneath the altar. The basilica became a symbol, not only of faith, but of survival, a reminder that belief could outlast the empire itself. Constantine filled it with gifts, golden lamps, marble altars, and relics of saints. Yet beneath all the splendor, the heart remained simple, a fisherman's grave beneath the stone. Through centuries, the building aged and cracked. Fires scarred it, time weathered it, and finally, the popes decided to rebuild. But they kept the same place, the same earth, so that every new generation would stand above that first prayer, that whispered promise, carved deep beneath the marble floor. From the 15th century onward, new architects and dreamers came to Rome. Bramante, Michelangelo, Bernini. Each left a trace of his soul in stone. They raised the dome that now crowns the city, a sky of marble and light. Michelangelo called it his prayer in architecture, a bridge between earth and heaven. As the basilica grew, the old one was slowly taken down, piece by piece. And yet, they kept the relics, the altars, the bones, always close to Peter's resting place. When the last stone was laid, the church stood like a mountain of faith, a beacon for the world, and a reminder that even the smallest tomb can become the heart of eternity. At night, candles flicker through the corridors, and some say, if you listen carefully, you can still hear the echo of hammers and quiet prayers mingling beneath the dome. Every corner of St. Peter's holds a language of its own, a silent scripture written in light, color, and form. The cross carved into the marble, the keys of Peter woven into ceilings, the dove above the altar, glowing like a small sun. These are not only ornaments, but messages, reminders of power, humility, and faith intertwined. Even the geometry speaks, the circle of the piazza, wide and open, embracing all who enter, while the columns curve like arms, as if the church itself were holding the world. When dawn touches the dome, golden rays slide down its curves, and for a moment, the whole basilica seems alive, breathing, waiting. Perhaps that is the true secret of the Vatican, not in hidden vaults, but in the way stone can speak, softly, to those who choose to listen. Far below the glowing altars, under layers of marble and centuries, lies a world few have seen. A necropolis, narrow corridors of ancient tombs, names fading from stone, frescoes crumbling into dust. Here, archaeologists found walls marked with Christian symbols and bones wrapped in precious cloth. The air is still, heavy with time. Each echo feels like a heartbeat from another age. Many believe Peter rests there. Others say the truth remains hidden, buried within the silence itself. What matters, perhaps, is not certainty, but the reverence it awakens, because in that darkness, among the forgotten graves, the birth of a faith still whispers, reminding us that light often begins beneath the ground. The rise of the Papacy. As centuries passed, emperors changed, kingdoms crumbled, yet the Bishop of Rome remained. Slowly, the Pope became not only a spiritual guide, but a voice of authority, where no emperor's voice was left to hear. From the chaos of invasions and wars, the Vatican began to shape its power. Letters carried across continents, seals pressed in wax, commands spoken in Latin that reached distant kings. The city around St. Peter's became a fortress of parchment and prayer, where decisions could bless or condemn entire nations. Some called it divine order, others called it ambition. But in that tension, the Church grew stronger, learning to rule with both faith and reason. And behind the golden doors, the story of power began to weave with mystery, creating the legend of the Vatican we still whisper about today. The meeting with Attila. One of the first great legends of papal power tells of Pope Leo I, who faced Attila the Hun. The year was 452. The Huns had already burned cities, fields, and temples, and now they marched toward Rome. Leo went out to meet them, alone, dressed not in armor, but in robes of white. Witnesses said that as he spoke, Attila's eyes widened in fear, for beside the Pope, he saw two tall figures of light, warriors holding flaming swords. Attila turned his army away, and Rome was spared. Historians speak of politics and gold, of negotiations and weariness, but the people remembered only the vision, two angels protecting the city of saints. And from that moment, they believed the Vatican stood under heaven's watchful shield. Forever. After the meeting with Attila, peace returned, for a time, and the name of Rome still carried its ancient weight. But centuries earlier, a simple fisherman had walked these same streets. Peter, the disciple of Christ, who, tradition says, met his end here, crucified upside down. Unworthy, he said, to die as his teacher did. They buried him quietly, in a forgotten grave on the Vatican Hill, among the tombs of common Romans, far from palaces, far from power. When Emperor Constantine embraced the new faith, he ordered a church to rise upon that grave. Stone by stone, the first basilica of St. Peter took form, a monument to humility that would one day become a symbol of divine authority. Beneath its floor, shadows still whisper. Archaeologists later found ancient tombs, fragments of names, and one simple inscription, "Peter is here." No one can say for certain, but believers felt it, that the heart of Christianity still beats beneath those stones. As centuries passed, the empire crumbled. Kings fell, armies vanished, but one voice in Rome remained. While emperors ruled from distant cities, the Bishop of Rome became the soul of the West. He was no longer only a priest, he was the guardian of memory, the keeper of the faith when kingdoms turned to dust. Without soldiers, without gold, the Church survived through words, through the promise that heaven itself stood with those who believed. In darkened catacombs, priests whispered prayers beneath the earth. Candles flickered against the stone, and every shadow seemed alive with presence. By the 5th century, people began to call the Bishop of Rome not just a leader, but the successor of St. Peter himself, the one chosen to hold the keys of heaven and earth. And thus, a quiet transformation began. The birth of what the world would come to know as the Papacy. The centuries of storms had passed, and from the ruins of empires, the Vatican began to rise, not as a kingdom of armies, but as a kingdom of faith. Pilgrims came from distant lands, walking for months, barefoot, to kneel where Peter had fallen. They carried stories of miracles, of voices heard in dreams, of healing light over the Vatican Hill. Each generation added to the legend, stones, relics, whispers, until the city within a city became a world of its own. Hidden chambers stored not only gold and parchment, but secrets, prayers that had changed the course of rulers, wars, and souls. And above them all, the Pope, no longer a frightened priest in the catacombs, but a figure wrapped in both power and mystery. The Vatican had become eternal, a place where heaven and earth seemed to breathe in the same rhythm. The dark centuries. After the light of early faith, came a time the chroniclers called the shadows. The empire was gone, but the world was not yet reborn. Nations fought for power, and sometimes the Vatican was drawn into their struggles. Popes rose and fell, some holy, some ambitious, and Rome itself became a stage where heaven's ideals met human weakness. Rumors spread through taverns and monasteries alike, of hidden sins behind sacred walls, of bribes whispered beneath candlelight, of families that ruled the papal throne like dynasties. Yet, even in those centuries of confusion, the rituals continued. Masses echoed through the night, incense curled in the air, and pilgrims still came to pray. It was a time of contradiction, when darkness and devotion walked side by side, and the Vatican learned that mystery could be both its burden and its shield. Among the shadows of the 10th century, one name still stirs, whispers, Marozia. A woman of beauty and cunning, she ruled Rome not with armies, but with alliances, secrets, and sons. They called her the Lady of the Vatican, the one who placed and removed popes as if moving pieces on a board. Her lovers, her children, her enemies, all bound by power and desire. Historians disagree on how much is truth and how much is rumor, but the chronicles speak of nights when decisions were made not in prayer, but in silence behind veiled doors. The church endured, bruised but alive, and from this darkness, a warning remained that even holy walls could not keep out the human heart. When dawn returned to Rome, the legend of Marozia faded into memory, but her shadow lingered, soft, elegant, and unsettling, like a perfume that never quite disappears. After Marozia's time came her grandson, a boy who would wear the crown of St. Peter. John XII became Pope at only 18, a child of power, raised in palaces, not in prayer. They said he hunted more than he preached, gambled more than he blessed, and turned the Vatican into a court of pleasures and whispers. His reign was filled with scandal, banquets, lovers, and betrayal. Yet even in the chaos, he still crowned emperors and wrote decrees, as if holiness and sin could exist beneath the same roof. Many called him cursed. Others said he was simply a reflection of his age, an age when faith was fragile and power was temptation. In the end, John died young, violently, mysteriously, and the chronicles recorded only one line, that the Lord took back what had never truly been his. Among the strangest stories ever told about the Vatican is that of Pope Joan, a woman who, they say, ruled the church in secret. According to the tale, she disguised herself as a man, brilliant and learned, rising through the ranks until she became Pope. For 2 years she reigned, her wisdom admired, her secrets safe, until one day, during a procession through Rome, she collapsed, giving birth before the stunned crowd. The story spread like wildfire, shocking, forbidden, impossible. Some claimed it was a fable told by enemies of the church. Others swore that an unmarked statue once stood where she fell. No document proves she existed, Yet the legend refused to die. Even centuries later, pilgrims whispered her name in fear and fascination. A warning, perhaps, that no wall, however sacred, can keep hidden every truth. As Europe stirred from its long sleep, another figure rose. Gerbert of Aurillac, who became Pope Sylvester II. He was not born into power, but into curiosity. A monk, a mathematician, a dreamer who studied the stars and the secrets of numbers. He built clocks, astrolabes, and taught that knowledge itself was a kind of prayer. But people feared what they could not understand. They whispered that he had studied magic in distant lands, that he had made a pact with the devil for wisdom. Some said he owned a bronze head that spoke with a human voice, telling him the future. When Sylvester died, legends claimed demons came to claim his soul. Yet in truth, he left behind no sorcery, only science, courage, and light. And so his story became a mirror, showing how wonder and fear often walk the same road through history. The end of the first 1,000 years approached, and with it came dread. People whispered that the world would burn, that the stars would fall, and that Christ would return in judgment. In monasteries, monks prayed without sleep, their chants echoing through the cold stone halls. In villages, bells rang through the night, warning of an unseen storm. And in the Vatican, the Pope himself, Pope Sylvester II, waited beneath the great dome, listening to the wind that carried both hope and terror. But the year turned, and the world did not end. The sun rose again over Rome, and life went on as before. People called it a miracle, and faith grew stronger. Yet something had changed. The Church had survived the end of time itself, and from that moment, its power felt eternal. The reforms of Gregory VII. Out of the fears of the millennium came a man of iron will, Gregory VII. He was not born noble, but his faith was fierce and unbending. He dreamed of a church freed from corruption, freed from kings and their gold. Gregory declared that no emperor should appoint bishops, no ruler should command the will of God. He stood against the mighty and the proud, even against the emperor himself. When the emperor defied him, Gregory excommunicated him, casting him out from the church and from heaven's favor. Through snow and mountain, the emperor came to beg forgiveness. For 3 days he waited barefoot in the cold, until Gregory at last opened the gate. That moment became legend, the meeting at Canossa, a symbol of the church's strength and the fragile balance between power and faith. The struggle between the church and the empire did not end at Canossa. It grew into a war of words, armies, and souls. Popes and emperors claimed the same right to rule. Heaven or earth, sword or key, which should stand above the other. Each crowned himself chosen by God. Each saw the other as a rival. And the people of Europe stood between them, paying the price in blood and faith. Cathedrals rose in glory, while fields burned in silence. Bishops carried swords, monks carried banners, and prayers became weapons whispered in the name of peace. The Vatican learned that holiness alone could not rule the world. It needed wisdom, patience, and sometimes silence. For the louder the battle outside, the quieter the soul had to become inside. Despite wars and corruption, a quiet transformation began inside the church. Monks and scholars searched not for power, but for purity. New orders were born, men and women who chose poverty over gold. They cared for the sick, taught the poor, and rebuilt what violence had destroyed. Gregory's spirit lived in them, though his body had long turned to dust. They believed that faith must breathe again, not in palaces, but in hearts. In monasteries, across Europe, voices rose in harmony. The Gregorian chants, deep, calm, endless like waves. Their sound filled the stone walls and reached the skies. A reminder that beyond politics, there was still prayer. The Vatican listened, watched, learned. For every reform carries both renewal and danger. And sometimes change itself can feel like a quiet revolution. As the centuries turned, the Vatican once again gathered strength. Kings knelt for blessings, armies marched under its banners. Gold flowed through Rome, carried by pilgrims, merchants, and princes seeking favor. The city of faith became a city of marble. Its churches crowned with domes, its corridors lined with art and silence. But with wealth came shadows, not of faith, but of temptation. Every coin that rang in the treasury echoed with both devotion and doubt. Some popes lived like saints, others like emperors, their robes heavy with jewels, their names whispered in awe and in fear. And still, through all of it, the basilica bells rang each morning, calling a world of sinners and saints alike to the same prayer, the same hope, the same fragile light. By the 12th century, pilgrims filled the roads of Europe like rivers of faith. They came from mountains, deserts, and kingdoms far away, carrying only a cross and a dream. Each step was a prayer, each mile a confession. They sought the holy city of Rome, where the Pope's voice echoed across the world. In exchange for their journeys, they were promised forgiveness, protection, and peace. Yet danger followed them: bandits, wars, hunger, and plague. Still, they walked believing that to reach St. Peter's tomb was to touch eternity. The Vatican welcomed them with incense, blessings, and relics of saints. And in their eyes the marble walls shone brighter than gold. Through them the Vatican became more than a fortress of power. It became a beacon calling the restless hearts of the world toward the promise of heaven. The Age of Crusades. The 12th century burned with zeal and ambition. Across Europe, the word crusade rang like a trumpet of heaven and war. Popes promised salvation to those who fought under the cross, and thousands answered, leaving behind families, homes, and peace. The first crusaders believed they marched for God, but soon faith and conquest began to blur. Gold flowed where prayers had once been, and swords carried the weight of both hope and greed. In the Vatican maps were drawn treaties, sealed banners blessed. The church became both shepherd and commander, guiding armies and souls. When news of victories reached Rome, the bells of St. Peter's rang. But when cities burned, those same bells were silent. It was a time when the holy and the human met on the battlefield, and history learned how fragile the line between them could be. As the Crusades raged, the Vatican shaped its image in ways the world would never forget. It wrapped its message not in armies but in symbols. The papal tiara with 3 crowns showed dominion over heaven, earth, and the souls between. The ring of the fisherman reminded all that the Pope was still Peter's heir, humble yet unyielding. When the Pope raised his hand in blessing, kings bowed their heads. They feared his words more than any sword, for a single decree could lift a nation or cast it into exile. In Rome, painters carved faith into stone. Mosaics glowed like captured sunlight, and cathedrals rose higher each century as if reaching for eternity itself. Through these symbols, the Vatican spoke without words, teaching that beauty too could be a kind of power, and silence a form of command. At the dawn of the 13th century, a single man seemed to hold the world in his hands. Pope Innocent III, young, brilliant, relentless. He saw the church not as a servant of kings, but as their judge. He crowned emperors, excommunicated rulers, and declared that the Pope stood above all earthly thrones. Under his rule, crusades began again, not only in the Holy Land, but in Europe itself, against heretics and those who questioned Rome. Monks carried his letters across mountains and seas, his seal pressed in red wax, his words like thunder cloaked in Latin grace. Yet Innocent was also a thinker. He believed the Vatican should guard both souls and order, and when he died, Rome mourned him as a man who had dared to hold both the keys of heaven and the weight of the world. Innocent's power reached far, but his shadow reached further. Across Europe, new voices rose, voices that spoke of simplicity and freedom. They called for faith, without gold, for prayer, without fear. The church called them heretics, and the Pope answered with armies and fire. In the hills of southern France, the Cathars refused to kneel. They believed the world was divided between light and darkness, and that the soul must rise by rejecting the greed of men. Innocents sent crusaders to silence them. Towns burned, prayers were drowned in screams, and the earth of Languedoc turned to ash. When it ended, the Vatican stood victorious but silent. Faith had survived, yet something pure had been lost. A quiet reminder that truth cannot be guarded by swords alone. Out of the smoke of war came new voices of hope. Men who sought not gold or conquest, but peace and renewal. Francis of Assisi walked barefoot through fields, preaching love for every living thing. He called the sun his brother, and the moon his sister. His joy disarmed anger. His poverty became wealth of the spirit. At the same time, Dominic gathered scholars and preachers, teaching them to fight ignorance with words, not blades. His followers became the guardians of knowledge, the keepers of truth, in debate and faith. The Vatican blessed both paths, for in them it saw a way to heal what war had broken. Two lights born in an age of darkness, reminding all that holiness could still walk the earth in humble shoes. By the end of the 13th century, the Vatican had become more than a city. It was a mind, a voice, and a mystery. Kings still fought over lands, but popes now ruled through parchment and ink. A letter sealed with the papal mark could change the fate of empires. Envoys crossed deserts and oceans carrying blessings or warnings. Artists filled the chapels with color and light, while in the vaults below monks copied manuscripts by candle flame, preserving the past for a future they would never see. And above it all, Rome watched. The bells of St. Peter's echoed across the Tiber, calling both sinners and rulers to remember that even power must kneel before faith, and faith itself must learn to live beside power. The age of saints and orders. The 13th century glowed with both holiness and hunger. The world longed for miracles and men who could touch the divine. New orders grew beside the old like branches, reaching for the same light. Franciscans preaching love and simplicity, Dominicans defending truth through reason, and others still seeking hidden paths of wisdom, prayer, and silence. In cloisters and gardens they copied books, healed the sick, and taught the poor. Their words spread farther than any army, their compassion stronger than fear. The Vatican blessed them, watched them, guided them, for through their devotion the Church seemed to breathe again. But as their fame grew, so did envy. And soon even holiness would be tested. For the closer one walks to light, the longer the shadow becomes. Among the new orders, none shone brighter than the Knights Templar. Warriors of the cross, bound by vows of poverty and silence. They guarded pilgrims, they built fortresses, they carried the secrets of the Holy Land. Their symbol, the red cross on white cloth, became a sign of faith and fear alike. They were bankers, builders, and mystics, their influence reaching from Jerusalem to Paris to Rome. But power breeds suspicion. Whispers grew that the Templars had found something in the East, a relic, a truth, or a curse too great to reveal. Kings envied their gold, popes feared their secrecy, and in the early 14th century the order was destroyed. Its leaders burned as heretics, its treasures vanished into legend. Even now, people ask what they guarded, what they knew, and the Vatican keeps its silence as if the answer still lies somewhere beneath the stones. After the fall of the Templars, the world did not forget. Their stories spread like roots into every age. Some said they had hidden sacred scrolls from the Temple of Solomon. Others spoke of a cup of light, the Holy Grail, carried west under moonlit skies. And some believed their knowledge survived in secret brotherhoods watched quietly by Rome. In the Vatican vaults, rumors grew of sealed chests marked with the Red Cross, of parchments no one was allowed to read, of maps pointing to places long erased from the earth. Historians find no proof, only traces, but the silence itself became part of the legend. For every mystery needs its guardian, and the Vatican learned long ago that the greatest secrets are not always written. They are simply not denied. While knights vanished into legend, another kind of power rose within the Vatican, the power of creation. Painters, sculptors, and architects filled its halls with color and breath. Their art spoke in the language of heaven, light, shadow, and awe. Michelangelo raised his dome toward eternity. His brush painted the birth of worlds. Raphael filled the chambers with calm faces of wisdom and grace. Bernini turned marble into movement, angels that seemed to breathe. Each artist carried both devotion and doubt. Some whispered that secret symbols hid within the frescoes, that geometry itself was a prayer, and that every line held a code between man and God. The Vatican became not only the heart of faith, but the cradle of beauty, a place where silence was measured in strokes of light and echoes of stone. Behind the beauty of the Renaissance, there was also curiosity and fear. The Church guarded not only relics but knowledge. Scrolls, maps, ideas that could change how men saw the universe. Within the Vatican library, scholars worked under watchful eyes. They copied ancient texts from Greece, Egypt, and Arabia, books of medicine, astronomy, and forbidden philosophy. Some said secret rooms held writings too dangerous to show, pages that spoke of worlds beyond our own, of stars that ruled destinies, of machines that could see through time. Whether true or not, the rumors grew until the library itself became a legend, a maze of shelves where truth and myth walked side by side, and those who entered seeking answers often left with greater questions than before. The age of trials and shadows. As the light of the Renaissance spread across Europe, a darker wind began to rise. The Church that had once guided minds now feared their freedom. New thinkers spoke of stars moving around the sun, of a universe vast and ancient beyond holy calendars. Their discoveries thrilled some and frightened others. In the Vatican, whispers turned to caution and then to silence. Faith and science stared at each other across the same candle flame, each claiming truth, each afraid to be wrong. In this fragile balance stood the souls of many, priests who loved knowledge yet feared heresy, and scholars who prayed before every experiment. It was an age when truth could save a soul or destroy a life, and every shadow on the wall seemed to hide both revelation and danger. In the 17th century, one name carried the weight of that conflict: Galileo Galilei. He watched the stars through his telescope and saw moons circling Jupiter. He realized that the earth itself was moving. That creation was larger than anyone had imagined. At first, the Vatican listened with curiosity, then with unease. For if the earth moved, where then was heaven? If man was not the center, what did that mean for faith? Galileo was summoned to Rome to answer before the Inquisition. He stood before cardinals and judges, not as a rebel, but as a believer, pleading that truth discovered in nature was also truth from God. They silenced him, forced him to deny what he had seen. Yet as he left the chamber, he whispered the words that history would never forget it. And yet, it moves. After Galileo, the Vatican fell quiet. The stars still burned above Rome, but few dared to speak of them. Scientists worked in secret, monks copied their books by candlelight, and truth waited in the shadows for a gentler time. The Church feared chaos, not knowledge. It sought to protect faith from doubt, but in doing so built walls between the two. Outside the walls, Europe changed. Nations rose, revolutions began, and reason claimed its throne. But within the Vatican, the rhythm of prayer continued, unchanged, steady, timeless. Centuries would pass before the walls softened again, before popes would speak of science with hope instead of caution, and the stars would once more be seen not as threats, but as part of the same divine light that had guided Peter long ago. Beneath the courtyards of the Vatican lies a labyrinth of rooms and corridors, shelves stretching farther than sight, filled with letters, maps, and memories. These are the Vatican archives, once called secret, not for mystery, but for privacy. Yet the name remained, and with it, the fascination of the world. Here rest letters from kings and scientists, documents sealed in wax, the confessions of emperors and the pleas of saints, stories of wars, betrayals, miracles, and forbidden hopes. Only a few are allowed to enter, scholars who walk in silence between the rows. They say the air feels heavy, as if time itself waits there listening. No one knows every treasure the archives contain. And so imagination fills the gaps, turning paper into prophecy and history into legend, a perfect marriage of truth and mystery beneath the marble city. Among the rumors that drift through centuries, some speak of lost gospels hidden deep in the vaults, scrolls that tell other versions of familiar stories. Others whisper of letters between popes and alchemists, of diagrams of the stars and strange machines that could see what eyes could not. There are tales of a book bound in black, said to reveal the true name of God, of a prophecy sealed by a pope and locked away until the end of days, and of a mirror that shows not the face, but the soul. Historians call these myths, yet the guards still walk the corridors each night, keys clinking softly against stone, and the doors remain closed. Perhaps the real secret is not what lies behind them, but why humanity still needs to believe that somewhere within those walls, answers wait in the dark. The shadows of power. The centuries turned, and the Vatican walked through fire again. Wars reshaped kingdoms, revolutions tore down thrones. But the city of faith endured behind its walls of marble and memory. Popes became diplomats and survivors, negotiating with kings, emperors, and generals, their words carrying both blessing and warning. Gold still flowed through Rome, yet so did fear, for every era brings its storms, and the Church learned that to protect its voice, it sometimes had to whisper. In the quiet halls, decisions were made that changed nations. Alliances formed, letters sealed destinies written in ink, not blood. The Vatican stood not as a fortress of stone, but as a fortress of time, watching empires rise and fade, while its bells kept ringing the same unbroken rhythm. Behind the solemn beauty of the Vatican, there were corridors filled with secrets. Cardinals plotting alliances, families weaving webs of influence that stretched across Europe. The Borgias and the Medicis turned the papal court into a theater of ambition. Feasts glimmered with gold, while whispers carried poison and prayer in the same breath. Assassins moved through gardens, priests carried messages hidden in scripture, and beneath frescoed ceilings deals were struck that shaped kingships and wars. Yet even amid intrigue, the Vatican remained strangely eternal. Its rituals unchanged, its candles still burning beside the altars of saints. Some called it corruption, others survival. Perhaps both were true, for the Vatican learned to live in two worlds at once, one of spirit and one of power, each reflecting the other like twin faces in a darkened mirror. Then came a storm that even Rome could not ignore. A monk in Germany nailed his words to a church door, and his questions shook the world. Martin Luther spoke of faith without gold, forgiveness without payment, and the echo of his hammer reached all the way to the Vatican. Panic turned to anger, councils met, scrolls burned, and for the first time in 1,000 years the church began to fracture. Across Europe, churches split, kings chose side, cities turned to ash, and the Pope's authority trembled like a candle in the wind. Yet the Vatican survived, it always did. It answered not only with punishment, but with reform, building schools, sending missionaries, printing new books of prayer and learning. From the ruins of division, the church rebuilt itself once more, scarred but standing, a monument to both human pride and divine endurance. The centuries that followed were restless, filled with art discovery and rebellion. The world grew wider, ships carried crosses and cannons to distant shores, and faith traveled with them, sometimes as light, sometimes as shadow. In Rome, the Vatican became the heart of renewal, its walls filled with painters, poets, and prophets. The Sistine Chapel rose like a vision from another world, its ceiling a storm of creation painted by Michelangelo's, a story of man reaching for God and God reaching back. But even in beauty there was unrest. New ideas about freedom, reason, and science pressed against the old walls, and the Vatican stood firm, holding its ground between past and future. Through every fire it faced, through every question it could not answer, its bells still rang at dawn, calling the world once more to prayer. Empires fell, revolutions swept across Europe. Crowns were broken, flags changed, and armies marched through Rome. But the Vatican endured. In the 19th century, it lost its lands, its armies, its worldly throne. Yet within those small walls, it found something stronger than power. It found permanence. Popes became voices instead of kings. Their reach measured not in borders, but in hearts. Their words carried across oceans through wires and radio waves, to believers who no longer feared distance or time. The Vatican stood smaller than ever, yet greater than before. A city within a city, a whisper that could still command silence in a noisy world. And as the sun set over St. Peter's dome, its golden light fell softly on stone, reminding all who watched that faith, like Rome, may bend, but it does not fall. The age of secrets renewed. The modern world arrived with noise machines and light. But even in the glow of science, the old mysteries did not die. People still wondered what lay beneath the Vatican floors. What stories waited in the sealed vaults? What truths the popes had kept for centuries? Photographs replaced frescoes, yet the same questions echoed. Was there a chronovisor, a device said to see through time? Was there a book of prophecies hidden from the eyes of men? The Vatican spoke little. It guarded its silence the way others guard treasure, and in doing so, kept the world curious. Because mystery is its oldest power, the unseen thread that binds the faithful and the doubters. And as long as there are locked doors, there will be those who listen at them quietly, hoping to hear eternity breathing behind the wood. In the early 20th century, 3 children in Portugal said they saw a woman of light. She spoke of peace, of war, and of what would come if humanity forgot to pray. The church investigated, doubted, then believed. And the messages of Fatima became one of the deepest mysteries of modern faith. 2 prophecies were revealed: wars, revolutions, and the fall of empires. But the third was kept secret, locked away in the Vatican for decades. When it was finally shown, it spoke of suffering, a bishop in white walking through ruins, and the faithful falling beside him. Some say it predicted the assassination attempt on a pope. Others believe it hides something more. The Vatican insists all has been revealed. But as always, its silence leaves room for wonder. And the world keeps asking if heaven truly spoke through children on a quiet field of light. In the deserts of Arizona, a great observatory rises under the stars. It was built near a Vatican research center, where priests study the heavens through glass and light. Beside it stands another telescope owned by scientists, not by Rome. Its name, Lucifer, born from an old Latin word meaning bringer of light. Yet rumors spread quickly. People said the Vatican was searching for something beyond faith, that it was watching the skies for signs of another world. The truth is far simpler. The telescopes are tools of study, not prophecy. But the story was too powerful to fade. The thought that the Vatican might gaze at the stars, searching for creation's secrets, carried the same fascination that always surrounded its name. Even in an age of reason, people still want the church to guard a mystery, as if the cosmos itself waits for a prayer whispered through the lens. Another legend speaks of a monk named Pellegrino Ornetti, a scholar of music and theology who served in the 20th century. He claimed that deep within the Vatican, a strange device had been built, a machine that could capture echoes of the past, not through magic, but through the science of vibration and light. He called it the Chronovisor, and said it could show the crucifixion of Christ, the speeches of Caesar, and even forgotten words of ancient philosophers. The church denied it, yet the story refused to vanish. Some said the device was dismantled, others that it still sleeps behind sealed doors. Whether truth or tale, it carried the same allure as every Vatican secret, the dream that somewhere in the quiet heart of Rome, time itself might still be listening. The hidden heart of the city. Today, the Vatican stands smaller than a park, yet larger than legend. A walled city of art, prayer, and silence, surrounded by the restless noise of Rome. Within its gardens, priests walk among olive trees where nightingales sing. The scent of incense drifts through open windows, mixing with the hum of tourists outside. And under every stone There is history waiting like a sleeping pulse. Pilgrims line the square, holding phones and rosaries. Some come for faith, some for wonder, some for answers that cannot be spoken. The world beyond changes faster each year. But behind those bronze doors, the rhythm of centuries still moves slowly. Bells still toll at dawn, candles still burn before the same ancient altar, and the Vatican continues to guard its oldest secret. That mystery itself is a kind of prayer. Far beneath the marble floors lies another Vatican, a world of tunnels, chambers, and silence, where air smells of dust, wax, and eternity. There rest the tombs of popes carved with Latin prayers, their names glowing faintly in the golden light of lamps. Footsteps echo softly on the stone like whispers of history. Deeper still lie the ancient catacombs from Rome's first believers, walls painted with fading symbols of fish and doves, the language of faith before words were allowed. Few are permitted to walk there, and those who do say the air feels alive, as if each breath carries the memory of countless souls who prayed and vanished. In that stillness time bends gently, and you begin to understand why the church guards its depths. For beneath the ground faith keeps its truest voice, the one spoken in silence. Above the vaults rises another labyrinth, the Vatican Library, a place where time is bound in leather and ink. Shelves stretch endlessly filled with languages long forgotten, letters from emperors, maps of vanished lands, books that chart the heavens and the hidden paths of the soul. Librarians move like ghosts between the aisles, their steps soft, their faces calm, as if guarding not books, but dreams. Some say a secret chamber lies behind a locked door with no key, where knowledge too heavy for the world sleeps in quiet exile. Here, truth and myth are not enemies. They share the same parchment, the same dust. And anyone who reads long enough begins to see that history is not only what happened, but what humanity chose to remember. When the sun rises over Rome, its first rays touch the dome of St. Peter's, gold deepening into fireglass, flaring like stars. From far away, it seems only stone and light, but inside that curve are centuries of faith, sweat, and genius. Each mosaic a prayer, each crack a confession. At dawn, the basilica is almost empty. A few pilgrims kneel between pillars, their whispers lost in the vast air. Some cry quietly, others just breathe and look upward. The light slides slowly down the marble columns, and for a moment it feels alive like grace moving through stone. Outside, the world begins again, cars, horns, voices, but under the dome, the silence holds, as if the centuries themselves pause each morning to listen. At night, the Vatican changes. The crowds fade, the lights dim, and the city exhales. Guards walk their rounds through corridors lit by a single lamp, and the wind carries the scent of wax and rain through open courtyards. Sometimes a door creaks softly, as if someone unseen has passed. A monk from another century, perhaps, or only memory itself. In the garden's fountains, murmur in Latin tones, telling stories no one writes anymore. Every corner holds a sound, the faint rustle of robes, the echo of prayers that once filled these walls like music. And when the bells strike midnight, their notes roll across Rome. Slow, deep, endless. It is in that hour that the Vatican feels most alive. Not as stone or power, but as presence. A heartbeat still steady in the dark. As dawn returns, the bells begin again, calling the world to wake. But inside the Vatican, the rhythm never truly changes. Centuries pass, empires rise and fall, scientists map the stars. And still this small city keeps its silence, its calm, its mystery. People ask what secrets it hides. Lost gospels, hidden relics, machines that see time. Perhaps those things never existed, or perhaps they wait quietly beneath the marble. But maybe the true secret is simpler, that faith endures only because of mystery, and mystery survives only because of faith. The Vatican stands as both mirror and riddle, reflecting all that humanity hopes to know and all it never can. So when the bells fade and the city sleeps again, somewhere within those ancient walls, A single candle still burns, its flame trembling softly like the breath of eternity. Reflections in the quiet. Now, the story rests. The Vatican remains where it has always been, between earth and heaven, between silence and sound. Its stones remember kings, its air remembers prayers, and every dawn feels like the first one again. Perhaps that is its truest power, not the gold or the walls, but the patience to endure to keep its mysteries safe until the world grows still enough to listen. The centuries will keep passing, names will fade, but the echo of faith will stay, carried in the wind that moves through the square, and in the hearts of those who believe that the unseen is sometimes more real than what we touch. You have reached the end of this quiet journey, through faith and time, through legend and silence. Before we part, let the mind wander for a moment. What do you think the Vatican truly protects? Is it relics and books, or something within us that still hungers for wonder? Do you believe every mystery must be solved, or should some remain hidden so the world keeps dreaming? Thank you for staying until the end, for listening with calm and patience. If this story brought you peace or curiosity, please subscribe so you will not miss the next nights of history and quiet reflection. Now, close your eyes, breathe slowly. Let the echoes of the Vatican fade into the dark, and may your dreams carry you gently through the corridors of time.